Welcome to the Actionable ESG Talk series, brought to you by AKFI, the Actionable Knowledge Foundational Institute, the world's first nonprofit industry consortium committed to bridging the gap between ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. Actionable ESG Talk series bring together great minds to discuss the current state and future states of ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation, and of course, AI. I'm delighted to be here with Maria Belasario, which I'll briefly introduce right now. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Dr. Belasario is a global food systems and sustainability leader and former Fortune 100 executive with experience spanning corporate leadership, startups, nonprofits, and advisory roles. Her work is grounded in the belief that strong business performance, environmental stewardship, and societal well-being must advance together, and that digital systems, data, and leadership ambidexterity are essential to making the integration operational. Maria is currently the CEO and co-founder of Food Security Solutions America, or FSSA for short, where she leads the development of circular bioconversion platforms, upscale food and agricultural waste in high-value ingredients for food and feed. Welcome again. And without further ado, we usually kick off the conversation with a question about trends and future outlook as we entered 2026 only 20 days ago. What emerging ESG trends do you see reshaping how companies integrate AI and circularity in mandatory sustainable reporting? And it's a long question.
Thank you, Manuel. First, I would like to thank you for inviting me back. I'm honored and delighted to be here today. So, how do we start? How did we enter 2026 with regards to ESG? I think ESG in 2026 is not going to move in a single uniform direction across the world. And this is a trend that has been shaping now for perhaps a year or perhaps a little more than a year. What we're seeing instead is we're seeing a transition that moves at multiple speeds. In some places, it is more rigorous and data driven, and in other places, it is much slower and without the support of policy. So, when you look, for instance, in the European Union, ESG is moving decidedly toward a more mandatory system and a system that is measured on outcomes and it is auditable under the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD in short. And this is actually a continuation of many years of investment, of policy investment in this space. Many companies who are based in the European Union, they are adopting and they have prepared themselves toward this transition. But companies that they are either headquartered in Europe and they have major operations in other parts of the world, like in the US or other parts like in Asia, Australia, and so forth, they're also affected by this policy, European policy, through their European operations. In contrast, we have a different situation in the United States where ESG has slowed down and today it is fragmented. There are certain states, like in California, with a scope 1 to 3 requirements, where actually companies they are obligated by law to follow the state mandates, but in other parts it is really voluntary and left to individual companies. And elsewhere in other parts of the world, like in Asia, in Australia, and in Latin America, where we have seen a patchwork actually of policies and industry moves, we see some alignment with global standards, but we don't necessarily see a uniformity or even an alignment or similarities in the way that these countries implement sustainability. So, how do we deal with this patchwork, this complexity that we see? I feel that digital systems and data, the power of data, and AI is a huge enabler for data, really matter. And what happens with AI, what should happen with AI is this transition from, automating the way that we do business, automating compliance, to actually harmonizing data across countries and making sure that we have traceable, reliable info data and information that allows us to uh, operationalize properly and actually make sure that we can do scenarios. We haven't talked a lot about scenarios, scenario building, but the reality is, regardless of how different jurisdictions shape their policies and how industry prepares for ESG, what is happening in the natural world in the climate is not is it is the climate change is independent.
Mm.
So scenario building continues to be very important, and a lot of these situations are being dealt by a number of organizations. Many organizations in actually in the IGO space and in the nonprofit space. For me personally, that was a big motivation. The move toward ESG and the move toward sustainability was a big motivation behind Food Security Solutions Americas. And for us to succeed, we will need to have real data uh, that
Mhm.
are grounded in facts and establish baselines. When you play in the circular economy, you need to have data to standardize as much as possible your feedstocks, your incoming materials and
Mhm.
resources, and then make sure that you use data to run modern operations that are going to give you the best possible efficiencies. So it is really important. The data digitalization, the data revolution, the digitalization component of our operations is absolutely mission critical.
Thank you. And you projected a couple of mental images. One of them is a quilt of a patchwork, a quilt of regulations. Although there is a tendency for these regulations to coalesce, I understand that US it's slowly coalescing toward the California rules, which are following some of the European rules, not double materiality, but the rest of the environmental and social that are pretty close. So, and to keep this patchwork together, we need, as you said, good data, real data. And I'll add, if you want to use AI, do not use it if you don't have good data, because AI is very good at tricking you and inventing things, hallucinating. So thank
Absolutely
you,
true.
Maria.
Absolutely true.
So
Well,
no data, no fun, we should say.
yeah, exactly right. But also, it is still the axiom that garbage in, garbage out is so true. And I think it is even more true now and more consequential if you are relying more and more on your data to actually make big decisions. So we really need to pay attention to the quality of data.
And you mentioned data has to be auditable, and I would add to a corollary. Good data in doesn't mean good data out, auditable and so on. There are a few steps that probably will reserve another talk for this, only what steps you need to take. But moving to the next question,
Mhm.
we mentioned ambidexterity in leadership in your CV. It's a new term for me to when I associate it with leadership in sustainability. I use the biological term, the ability to use both hands equally. But please go ahead and tell us a little bit more about why is this important in sustainability?
Ambidexterity is exactly as you said. It's actually a neurological term, and it is the ability to use both hands equally well. And it is not the rule in nature; it's the exception. So, and that's why it is not so easy. And the word itself is a bit clunky. But let us break it down into why this is important. Sustainability is sustainability cannot exist without the without a robust economic system. And sustainability is not going to happen overnight when you basically change the world overnight. So this is not even nature, who is a master. Nature has mastery in reinventing itself, but this happens over a long period of time. And humans, we don't have that ability to operate over, long periods of time. So we need to make sure that we perform and transform at the same time. And that's exactly the definition of ambidexterity, the ability to do both, the ability to look after the business as is today and to make sure that there is enough leadership, financial support, and organizational alignment to make sure that we innovate for the future. So organizations need to deliver on today's priorities. And from my business of in food, we need to be able to do food security, to do quality, to do cost,
Mhm.
compliance, nutrition, making sure we protect the environment, to do all of this while at the same time we're designing products and processes and supply chains for the future that can harness circularity, circular models, that can
Mhm.
use digital systems to expedite things and
Mhm.
actually move toward regenerative innovation. Sustainability means we maintain the status quo. But as things, progress with economic and industrial development, we need to make sure that where possible, we also regenerate. So this dual operating system will require an ambidextrous outlook, both in leadership, but actually in the workforce readiness. From my past experience working in Fortune 100 companies and leading R&D organizations, the key lesson is you really need to have both domain expertise and to be digitally capable. And the two things must be paired. It must be combined, must be paired. The people who are experts in the traditional sciences, let's say in ag science, in engineering,
Mhm.
in packaging and product development, they will continue to be experts, but they need to embrace and they need to understand the basic tenets and how data, data analytics and AI systems work so that they can work in partnership with their digital counterparts. This combination is going to make very effective teams and it is going to actually enable leaders to be able to navigate the
Absolutely.
duality of their deliverables. So really, it is that ability to perform and to transform at the same time.
So, uh, excellent insights about the ambidexterity. Um, I would think actually more of a juggler as
Yes,
a mental image because you have to keep everything you mention up in the air. You are not allowed to drop any of this list of uh, sustainability related, from circular economy to finance to social, of course, to environmental, as you mentioned. Innovation happens all the time, and I know you are now working in multiple capacities as startup advisory and innovation. Uh, do you have some insights that you can give us? Of course, everything that is public about climate tech, biotech, and AI startups and how they scale sustainability innovation in those complex and competitive environments.
yes. Absolutely. But let me just maybe as a segue, let me just adding to your earlier comment, Manuel. So when I was for the biggest part of of my career in the food industry, we basically had two objectives for every innovation. It had to meet the cost target and it had to meet the quality target. And this is for mainstream food. But it isn't, that is just the that is not even cost of entry anymore because your food has to be nutritional. But in the past
Exactly.
10, 15 years, we have been adding sustainability considerations and metrics in the work. So now we have doubled the considerations and KPIs that any project has to satisfy. So this is a complex environment. And this is where data and AI are fundamentally changing the way that R&D is working. So
Absolutely.
R&D is about formulating and reformulating using a number of variables. But with the ability of AI, we are now making this more systematic, faster, more scientific in terms of really optimizing a process that is based on multiple variables. So we're balancing in the context of food, we're balancing the taste, the texture, the cost, the nutrition, the environmental impact, how beautiful it looks for the consumer, how easy it is to handle, how easy it is to dispose of, while at the same time making sure that we have the right supply in place and we are managing risk in a responsible way. So this is where AI can come in and help R&D and their partners in supply chain procurement and so forth solve multivariable problems. And in my advisory work, for instance, I'm advisor to a company called a startup called Proxy Food. And there, Proxy Food is developing AI solutions for formulating innovative products for the food industry and equally helping, excuse me, R&D teams reformulate products that they're not optimal for the needs of the consumers or they're not optimal for the way that supply chains are evolving. So their work is dramatically reducing the time that it takes to perform a certain task and actually gives them the opportunity to identify new dimensions of that particular problem that perhaps they had not been addressed in a more of an analog, um, linear way of thinking. So this is a really good example, and you know these capabilities are going to develop in the next 2 years. We're going to see a huge transformation. We're going to see a leapfrog in how AI-enabled R&D is changing the way that we're doing R&D. But also, we are seeing AI really transforming the way that the whole ecosystem of
Absolutely.
ag tech, food tech, biotech is moving toward new solutions. So, you know, one example is reducing food waste. This is actually where I participate in this big effort, and where we're actually, we are taking waste and we are converting it into useful products or valorizing the waste.
Hmm.
Well, if global food was a company, it would be number three in emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, after China and the United States, and very close with India. So the degree of the problem is absolutely massive. Another example that I wanted to share with you, which is very, very exciting, and where actually I have an advisory position, is with a climate tech biotech company called Solmea. They're based in Athens, in my native country of Greece. And what Solmea does, Solmea captures carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Hmm.
It's really a CCU, carbon capture and utilization company. They convert this carbon dioxide into a substrate, and then they use biotechnology and food technology to produce real food that is nutritionally advantaged. And this real food is really can is has exceptionally good functional properties.
Hmm.
Again, we are making food out of gases. This is a great it's a great way of creating a circular system. And of course, there are other areas that they're more advanced because they've been playing more in this space, and that is, we have tech-enabled agriculture, or otherwise calling it precision agriculture.
Mhm.
We are helping the soil improve its health and its productivity through regenerative practices and so
Yeah.
forth. All of these examples in the food system, they require data and they require excellent, excellent analytics and AI enabled, both software and hardware.
And as you mentioned that actually one of the observation in an AKFI, and we're working on a standard, is before that you put 80, 90, maybe 100% of your data inside your company. We call it a vertical
Mhm.
use of data, right? A lot of data, a lot of private data, security issues, and so on. However, this sustainability brings now the need to connect data with your supply chain, as you mentioned, with your
Correct.
ecosystem on one hand, with the supply chain in the other hand, and all this has to be aligned with multiple factors, right? Has to be nutritious, has to be economically, make sense to be profitable,
Mhm.
has to be properly packaged, properly distributed, but also has to come from agriculture, from, as you mentioned, for instance, from precision agriculture, preferable from circular economic systems, right? Where the recycling is considered, as you mentioned, carbon capturing. Reminds me that beer requires a lot of carbon as well, carbon dioxide
Correct.
in the production process. So absolutely, and if I can capture everything in one word, it's a complexity in reporting and executing to sustainability. So complexity comes with sustainability.
Exactly. So, I think we will need to reinvent what pre-competitive sustainability and data collaboration looks like. So when you take any one organization, you have the expertise or the functions, they're vertical. So, and they're very well defined. Sustainability, R&D,
Hmm.
these are vertical functions. Then you have, I'm sorry, I didn't mean sustainability. I meant supply chain, R&D,
Yes.
procurement, they're vertical functions. So are expertise, like food safety, mechanical engineering, they're vertical functions, vertical expertise.
Absolutely.
But sustainability, ESG, and and digital and AI, they're horizontal functions. So in any one organization, you have to integrate the verticals and the horizontals in a much better way. Now, when we go into the outside world, let's say the procurement function
Hmm.
having to work together with their suppliers and connect data on matters of sustainability and ESG, that requires sharing information, sharing data, connecting systems so that the systems are conversant with one another and effective. Or it could be other areas where, let's say, a company who relies on their on analytical chemistry
Hmm.
from, like they outsource analytical chemistry, they need to connect their data, their internal and external data, and they should be able to sort of like see patterns, establish baselines, and see patterns and outliers together. So this is another degree of collaboration. This type of collaboration exists, but now we need to really invent it and refine it for matters of sustainability and AI. And then you have the competitive world, company to company, competitor to
Hmm.
competitor, or you have databases from non-for-profit organizations or IGOs and working with commercial entities. So how this is going to happen, it has to be masterminded. It has to be orchestrated and organized. But you cannot do this, like proactively. I don't know that our proactive record is very good. I think we need to break down the problems into very specifics and
Hmm.
make sure that it is better to make progress with smaller but sure steps than try to solve the world and actually be paralyzed. So how we define the problems, how we define the stakeholders, and how we bring the solutions, how we design the solutions and bring them to bear. In my mind, it is better to be done using cases where there is
Hmm.
an urgency, there is a need, and where there is a desire, and where there is a commitment to solve a problem. And by solving various problems and demonstrating change, I think we're also creating a momentum for others to follow.
And there is a lot of change coming up, so
Yes.
couple of unpacking.